Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining the Words Margins Bookselling Month event, Storytelling and Solidarity, Bridging the Gaps Between Our Communities and Movements. You guys are in for such a treat. My name is Alyssa, and I'm the program deputy at The Word. The Word is a nonprofit organization whose mission is storytelling for collective abundance. We center authentic storytelling for BIPOC, LGBTQIA2S+, neurodiverse and disabled communities. We support and connect writers, publishers, booksellers, and readers. We explore and build collective models for the literary ecosystem and hold space in community. Our main programs include the editor writer mentorship program, and as a matter of fact, the applications for that mentorship program are open now. So apply before the deadline, which is August 4th, if you have a complete manuscript, for an opportunity to work with an actual editor as your mentor into publishing. And another one of our major programs is the Margins Literary Conference and Book Festival, which is taking place this September. So make sure you register for that. And this program, our Margins Bookselling program, which we often get to work with amazing organizations like the one that I will be introducing shortly. We always have new events and programming to share, so we hope that you'll check us out and stay up to date. Now I'm excited to introduce your host for today, Amma, the Senior Programs Associate at I Stand With Immigrants, and Dr. Felicia Russell. I am so excited for this conversation. The floor is.
Thank you so much, Alyssa, for that wonderful introduction. And hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. As Alyssa mentioned, my name is Amma Akoto. I use she, her pronouns. And I work as the Senior Programs Associate for the I Stand With Immigrants initiative. And we are really, really excited today to have a conversation about storytelling and solidarity, specifically about what those words mean, because we hear them a lot, sometimes decontextualized, sometimes with the meaning and the power of their meaning removed. So we're really excited to use this opportunity during Margins Bookselling Month to talk about what those words really mean, and also what they mean in terms of building solidarity between institutions and communities and the people that live in those communities. And so I'm really, really excited to have with me today Dr. Felicia Russell, who does a lot of that storytelling work, a lot of that really important work to help build connections and build solidarity between different people who experience, various types of marginalizations and systems of oppression in this country. And Dr. Felicia Russell has also recently published a book doing that same type of really important work. And so it seemed like the most perfect time right after Immigrant Heritage Month in June and during Margins Bookselling Month this July to have this conversation, to talk to Felicia, who does a lot of work specifically uplifting Black undocumented students. And so thank you all so much for joining us today. We're going to have about a 30-minute discussion, and then we'll have time at the end for Q&A from those of us who have joined us today. So I'll start off by, I guess, like I mentioned, I am a Senior Programs Associate for the I Stand With Immigrants initiative, but I am so much more than my job. I'm also a writer, a dancer, a storyteller, a sister, a friend, a comrade to so many people. And I'm joined by Dr. Felicia Russell, who is the director of the Higher Ed Immigration Portal at the President's Alliance for Higher Education and Immigration. She identifies as a Black DACA recipient, scholar, and practitioner. Her research agenda explores the experience of non-Latinx undocumented students, but more specifically, Black undocumented folks, and the intersections of race and immigration status. Her recent book, which I just mentioned, Amplifying Black Undocumented Student Voices in Higher Education, was released earlier this year. And most recently, she was featured on MSNBC. So we do have a mini celebrity here with us today, folks. Felicia earned her undergraduate degree at Cal Lutheran, her master's in public policy from Pepperdine University, and her doctorate from Temple University. So thank you so much, Felicia, for being here today, for taking the time out of your certainly busy schedule to have this conversation with me. And again, to kind of give an overview of the conversation we're going to have today, we do a lot of our work in just not just the immigration space, but in the storytelling space, in the movement for Black lives, and generally just the social justice space. We do a lot of this work under structures that are capitalistic, oppressive, and oftentimes inaccessible by design. And so we're hoping to use this session today to serve as a teach-in for our communities, but specifically for bookstores and booksellers and these people who work in places that can be community centers and safe third spaces, but places that can also help to meet literacy and language barriers that exist because of these systems of oppression that we mentioned earlier. And so today we're going to be talking about a lot, but it's going to be centered on storytelling, on experience, and solidarity. And so we'll jump right into that. Dr. Russell, as I've mentioned countless times already, you have recently published a book, uplifting the stories of Black undocumented students. So I wanted to just start us off by talking about what led you to write that book and to focus specifically on that group of people. Give us 1 second, folks, while we figure out these tech issues.
Dr. Russell, can you hear us? So it looks like you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself? Okay, I'm going to add your other one to the screen and remove this one. Let's see if that works, okay?
Oh, what happened?
There we go. Oh, you're there twice.
Oh, now I'm here twice. Okay.
Here we go.
All right, we're good.
Okay.
Black women in STEM.
There. Oh my gosh. Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, I don't know what just happened. I pressed something and then all of a sudden I could not find the camera. But I'm happy to be here and excited to engage in the conversation. I don't know if I missed anything or if you asked a question.
Yeah, well, I figured we'd just start with your book since it recently came out and since it, I think, and captures a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. So I just wanted for you to tell us what led you to write that book specifically, and then to focus on that group of people, of
Yeah.
Black undocumented students in higher ed.
For sure. Yeah, so, typically, a lot of undocumented students, a lot of undocumented people really find out about their status in high school, and I was no different. I really understood what it meant to be undocumented in high school. So I was originally from Jamaica, and as a sophomore in high school, learned that I was undocumented. And fortunately for me, I had a really good college counselor. And so I was able to disclose my status to him. And he was really, really good in terms of, knowing the landscape, the immigration landscape, and really introducing me to the first undocumented student club on campus. But one thing that was unique for me was that I was the only Black undocumented student in that group, right? So, and I talk about this in the book, but my first meeting that I ever attended, one of the students in the meeting asked the counselor why I was there, right? Because it was their safe space, and she hadn't seen Black undocumented people. And so she thought I was invading her safe space, right? And that was an impactful moment for me and really influenced my journey in wanting to write this book. I really wanted to understand the experiences of Black undocumented people. I knew what my experience was, and that I experienced a lack of belonging and a sense of invisibility and all of that. And so I wanted to see if others were experiencing, a similar plight, if they were Black and undocumented, right? So all of these living at that intersection. And so that was the genesis for this book. And I, interviewed 15 other people. And, so the book is in two parts. Part memoir, which is the first half, which is my story, and the second half is for the nerds who want to jump into the research and all of that. But yeah, that's really what it influenced me to write the book.
Yeah. I'm gonna kind of. Oh, is there echo? Can you hear me? Okay. Okay. I'm gonna kind of jump around a little bit because you said some things that kind of stuck out in my brain, but you mentioned intersections and the intersections of those identities. And I think this is another one of those words that we hear and have heard a lot in the past couple of years. But not only that, but that coupled with the fact that you chose to focus a lot of this book on your own personal experiences, I've seen the importance of that in this work of kind of acknowledging that a lot of these political ideologies and these praxis that we kind of use and develop as advocates and as people that are fighting for a new world, we have to incorporate people's lived experiences because they're people are able to form political identities, they're able to form ideologies, they're able to form ways of seeing the world based on what they know and what they experience. And so I can only imagine that a lot of that went into this book and that people were able to kind of build their own world, their own thoughts and ideas based on how they experience. Because even just the story of you saying that that person just was unaware that there were Black undocumented people. And I'm sure that that lack of awareness of Black people and the intersections of race and immigration status probably colored a lot of how she viewed immigration reform and immigration activism. And I think probably left some things outside of her purview just simply because she wasn't able to see how those experiences impacted Black undocumented students. So yes, completely understand. And thank you so much for that.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. And funny enough that you mentioned that because that is um the root of the book is intersectionality. And so I focus on that, and that's kind of the framework that I pulled and created some of those questions from to talk to the different participants about their experience. And for context, I grew up in California, right? If I grew up in New York or Florida or DC, my experience would be different. I would have been surrounded by, many more Black undocumented folks. And also, my classmate at the time would have been surrounded by a lot more Black undocumented people, right? California is more impacted with Latinx undocumented people, right? And so that's what she's going off of. I mean, that's what I was going off of at 14, 15 years old. I knew obviously they're Black immigrants, but I'm like, where are the Black undocumented people at, right? Like, especially in that group, there's a bunch of us. And literally, I went to a predominantly Black and brown school. But in that space, I was the only one. And that, continued on in undergrad and grad school. And even now, in the immigrant justice space, it's not a lot of Black people in the space, right? And unless they're in like Black centered orgs or whatever. And so yeah, so intersectionality is used as the framework to guide the questions and the conversations in the book.
Yeah, and that's really important. I'm really excited to hear you mention specifically the immigrant justice space because at the I Stand with Immigrants initiative, we've done a lot of work in the past couple of years to talk about what some of those shared experiences are, particularly amongst Black people that live in America. Because, I think citizenship and immigration status, those are two things that I think can be divisive amongst Black people in the United States. But there are so many other things that we share, so many other common experiences with systems in this country that we share, in so many ways for us to kind of reach across the aisle and better understand other people's experiences. And as a person who is not an immigrant, but has done a lot of this work for the past couple of years, I have found that that has been really important and that it's important to kind of to make those connections, and storytelling has been a huge part of how I've made those connections. And so, as we're talking about this, what are some of the other things that we and other people, organizations, individuals, bookstores, and institutions, what can they do to amplify these voices as well as others who might already be doing this work?
Yeah, no, great question. And I uh most of my friends are African American women. And recently we're having a lot more conversations about immigration because obviously they knew I was Jamaican and all of that, but not until the book or until I started being a little bit more public about my story that they were like, "Oh my gosh, like we didn't know this." And now they are so proximate to the issue that they care and they want to know more about it, right? And so I think To that point too, it's about proximity, and it's about making sure that folks understand that immigration is also a Black issue. And I think we do that, one, by having like events like this where we center those authors, or we center those stories around undocumented Black folks, right? And when I go to college campuses, that's one of the things I tell them, is that we have to expand the undocumented narrative and include undocumented Black voices. And we can do that by way of media, scholarship, advocacy, and practice, right? And this is one of them. I think second, another would be, mainstream organizations should partner with Black centered orgs, or Black authors, or minoritized authors, however, whatever you want to think, but partner with those groups, and to be able to put and promote those stories out, right? So we can challenge the homogeneity of the undocumented community. Um, I think we have to also work to create more inclusive spaces for Black immigrants, right? So I think that, when we're having conversations about policy, we should have the perspective of Black undocumented folks in the room as well, because if we don't understand the full context of the community, we can't accurately serve the community. And I think this is a way to do it, right? Making sure we bring people together, but making sure that um, we're being inclusive. And so just to summarize that, I think we have to partner with mainstream orgs, should partner with Black centered orgs like the Undocu Black Network, and even the work that I stand with immigrants that you guys are doing. I think that's important. So speaking of folks who are doing the work, Baji, the Undocu Black Network, a lot of folks are trying to really get us to understand and see the full picture of the undocumented community, and realize that immigration is a Black issue, and that to make the conversation more nuanced and smarter and more inclusive, it's not just on Black immigrants to do that, but it's on all of us, right? So we're partnering with our Black American friends, and Black immigrants, and then Black undocumented immigrants, and Latinx undocumented immigrants, Asian right? And so partnering with all the different orgs to really kind of promote the stories and the narratives of Black undocumented people. But storytelling is really just one of the best ways to do that, to your point.
Yeah, one of the best ways, and also just like a really good starting point, because you can start at a story. You can start by learning about someone's experiences, and then take that. And like I mentioned, like, people's lived experiences have the power to inform how they view the world, how they understand the world. Like, I was a Black feminist before I knew what those words meant. I was a 17-year-old in high school and was tired of people telling me what to do and how to be a woman and how to be the right kind of woman and what that meant for me. And I knew as a 17-year-old that this didn't make any sense to me. But then when I got to college, I finally had some language to put to my own experiences. And so, to your point, storytelling is just one of those first initial steps that we can take to build these levels of solidarity and these levels of connection. And that really clicked for me when you mentioned, you said we have Black Americans, we have Black immigrants, but we have Black undocumented immigrants, we have Black women who are undocumented, we have disabled immigrants, and there's so many layers of identity that people in this country occupy. And again, thank you, Alyssa, for your introduction, because Alyssa mentioned how the word's work is geared towards people who occupy these marginalized identities. And again, I am probably going to say it 30 more times tonight, but storytelling is kind of that first step that we can take. So yes, thank you.
Absolutely.
But kind of to that same point, storytelling is a very vulnerable thing. It requires us to tell our life stories. It requires us to turn a mirror on ourselves and then share that reflection with the entire world. And so I kind of wanted to talk to you about what made you choose that avenue for your advocacy, because as we know, there are people that are not directly impacted by the system, such as myself, but who still find value and merit in doing this work, and who still bring a lot of important stuff to the table. So what made you choose to go the route of sharing your own personal story as a means of doing this work?
Yeah, I think for a long time I was trying to understand what my place was in the immigrant justice movement. And for a long time I didn't know, because I felt so othered by the undocumented community. In college, when I tried to join that group, I just didn't feel like I belonged in that group. And so for me, belonging came in, like the Black Student Union, right? But even in that space, and I will say too, my experience is different because people love Jamaican culture. Okay, they love Jamaican food, the music, and so I know other Black immigrants who have different experiences in like a Black student union on a college campus because their culture is rarely celebrated or talked about. But Jamaican culture, there's like, oh, let's go get Jamaican food. Let Jamaican food be the theme of the event today, and so I didn't really struggle with that. So my sense of belonging was really in the Black student union space, right? um but I knew that I needed to tell my story. I just didn't know how and when. And so it took me a while. And someone asked me recently, when will they know that they should share their story? And I'm like, everyone might not need to share their story. It's going to be something, a calling kind of, that you feel like, hey, I need to do this. This is something that I need to do. And for me, it took some time, right? My first op-ed I wrote was for the National Immigration Law Center, but I wrote it under a pseudonym and under Abigail. I mean, I don't know why I chose Abigail. I don't know why I chose that name, but that's what I wrote it under. And that was 2017, probably related to what was happening. And so, that was my first, kind of dipping my toes basically with sharing my story. And then after that, I just got braver and braver and braver. And I realized every time I shared my story, there's like a weight that just kind of fell off, where I just felt freer. I'm like, this is what it is. And I understood that lived experiences are so important. And so, coupled with research, I felt like it would be really powerful for me to share my story and be vulnerable about it. It's tough work, right? Like, I mean, I think, after the MSNBC op-ed, I got a lot of, just like emails that's like, that's not good, right? That people wouldn't want to receive. So it takes time, but for me, it felt like I needed to do that. It was something that I had to do and how I could contribute to this space.
Yeah. And you kind of already touched on this, but I was wondering if you could speak a little bit more to the consequences of being so vulnerable, of putting your whole life out there and, telling. Because I also remember in your book, in the beginning, in the forward, you had to be very explicit that like these were your perceptions of your experiences with other people.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm curious to know the consequences or just the impacts of being so vulnerable and sharing so much of yourself with an international stage, because MSNBC is everywhere.
Yeah, no, I think the benefits outweigh the consequences, so I'll start there, because if people know your story, then they will support you, right? When I did my advanced parole trip this year, I knew, and so many folks were telling me like, we got you. It's fine. Like if something happens, this is gonna be a problem. We're gonna get this out there, right? And so I had that. It gave me like a sense of security as well, in addition to like shedding some like weight, right? Because a secret, there's like at the root of it is shame, right? So it's just like this heaviness. And once I shed that, it was just easier for me to continue doing it. So I would say the benefits outweigh the consequences. Like, of course, I receive hate email and all of that, but it doesn't bother me too much at this point. And I think I waited, right? I did it at the right time. I'm 32 now. I think if I did it at 24, 25, when I didn't really have a good sense of who I was, or uh, you know, anything that was mine, or just felt strong and good about where I was and who I am as a human being, it might have been different. But I waited, and it was at my time, on at my pace. And so, but yeah, it's it could be stressful. Folks are mean and ignorant, and yeah.
All of the things. Yes. Okay. Well, kind of pivoting from the storytelling aspect of our conversation, I wanted to move us into the solidarity piece. And I think this is where we'll start talking a little bit more about how we can incorporate bookstores, booksellers, and community institutions. But before we get there, I wanted to just, what is solidarity? We hear that all the time. We hear it from corporations who have no accountability to our communities. We hear it from organizations who, at the end of the day, sometimes put other people's needs before other people's. And so I'm curious to know, as a Black woman, as an undocumented immigrant, as a scholar, as an advocate, as a worker, as an educator, what solidarity means to you, and in like the real tangible way, not just like a, hey, you my buddy, I'm your buddy.
Yeah, no, I would say just a sense of, I think it's a sense of belonging, a real sense of belonging. That's what in solidarity means to me. I mean, like I said, with my friends growing up, I always felt like I belong. Um, but in the immigrant space, I didn't always feel like I belong. But we're saying, hey, we're fighting for all immigrants, right? I think once folks are exposed to your story and they're more proximate to you, they also want to create a sense of belonging for you, right? And I think that's just what it means. I think it means like, being willing to put yourself on the front lines for other people, right? I had, in 2020, when the protests, the marches were happening, one of the things one of my friends said to me is, because I was like, I'm going, but obviously, if something happens to me, it's completely different from if it happens to my friend who's also Black, right? Which also there's still going to be, you know, it's high, the consequence is higher for than it was a white person. But her point was, I know for you it's even higher because it's not just like criminalization, it's probably now involved with the immigration system. So I'm gonna drive, I'm gonna do this, da da da, let's go. That's what in solidarity means for me. It's just folks just really understanding your experience and really knowing how to show up for you. And vice versa, right? Me being able to understand other people's experience, if they're marginalized in some area, what does that mean for me to show up for them and advocate for them or support them? So I think at its core, it's really just a belonging and an understanding of people's experiences and how you can uh, be in community with them.
Yeah, and I appreciate the story about your friend in the protest, because I also remember reading that in the op-ed. And to me,
Mm.
along those same lines, solidarity is like a shared understanding of the systems at work, and like an acknowledgement that we will all be impacted by this in some form or another. And I think that, once we get into identity and the layers of identities that people occupy, as you kind of unwrap them, it can be a little bit overwhelming because, like you mentioned, you're Black, you're a woman, you're undocumented. And so your friend had to be aware of what that means at each layer of your identity and how this one situation is going to impact you. But I think that also is like, in a world where you can be criminalized and taken away from your home and taken away from your family for simply showing up to speak out against an injustice that happened against someone else who does not
Mhm.
occupy the same identities that you are, in that world, neither one of you is safe. And so to
Mhm.
me, that is what I think solidarity kind of comes down to, is realizing that, we have a shared stake in this fight. And I think that over here at the initiative, we try to do a lot of that work. Like I mentioned, our Stories of Black Migration was a narrative campaign where we were really trying to tease out what are some of these shared experiences between Black people, regardless of their immigration status. And a lot of that, what you just mentioned with police brutality, we had one person say that a cop is not going to like pull you over and ask you what's that flag in your car before harming you in some form, way or another. And so, yes, just echo to all of that. Thank you. um, so I do want to make sure we have time at the end in case there are questions, and we're running up on 30 minutes. So I'll kind of move to the point specifically about the bookstores. So I mentioned that bookstores have the capacity, and I know for me growing up, we had a local bookstore. So I am from DC, and for those of you who are in the area, Sankofa Bookstore. And I grew up in a Pan-African community here in Washington, DC. So the folks at Sankofa Bookstore were like my daddy's friends and my mama's friends. So the bookstore there was a place where we could go to have community meetings. It was a place that I could go after school, and there were people there who knew me, who knew my parents, and could watch out for me. So we know that bookstores, independent bookstores, that these are community institutions that have the potential and the capacity to be safe spaces for children, to be community centers, to be safe third spaces for other vulnerable people. But then also in the United States, where being able to read and write and where knowing English are like crucial to your survival, and oftentimes provide barriers for many people in this country. I wanted to talk a little bit about how bookstores and booksellers can help bridge this gap. And then also with regard to telling the stories of marginalized people, how bookstores and booksellers kind of fit into this puzzle. And I know that's like a big wonky question with a lot in it, but
No, I mean, I think this is part of it, right? This conversation that we're having, um, is that we have to have conversations like this, and bookstores are a major part of that because obviously they, they sell the books, they decide which books they want to sell and which books they want to put at the front and feature this week and all of that. And so I think it's about intentionality on their part, right, knowing who's in the community, who released the book this week, and what is it about, and how do they put that forth, right? Promote that narrative, right? I was having a conversation recently with my therapist actually, and he was like, oh my gosh, like I read your book, I love it, but I would not have picked up this book if it wasn't for you, and I know you, but I just wouldn't have been thinking about Black undocumented people. And so he was just saying like, hey, I think you should figure out a way to like get this book out there in all these different outlets, whether it's like through a podcast or documentary style or whatever, so that more people can have access to it. And I think it's the same thing, and I would say like all those different outlets are like third safe spaces as well. Bookstores can do that, just be intentional about the books that they're featuring, being intentional about centering and featuring Black voices, marginalized voices, the marginalized within the marginalized, right? How they go about promoting those books. I think that's all a part of it. Partnering with authors, partnering with orgs that are doing good work to promote certain books and certain narratives. So yeah, so I think all of those ways, that's how we can, that's how bookstores can continue to break those barriers, right? Because if you walk into a bookstore and they're saying like, hey, this is important for you to read, you might think twice about it, versus walking in there and it's in the back somewhere, and it's there but it's not, there's no intentionality behind it. um so yeah, hopefully I answered your question. I think I rambled there for a bit.
no, you did. And it was perfect. And I think it, again, this is the perfect moment for us to be having this conversation because in our work with the word over the past couple of years, we've seen that a lot of the bookstores and booksellers that they work with are intentional about creating these community spaces. And I
Mm.
think that that has just been really heartwarming to see, but then also a good example for how, you think of a bookstore, you think this is a place to sell books, but when you are in community with people, when you are truly exhibiting solidarity, and when you are committed to uplifting stories for the greater purpose of changing our world, then these places can become community centers. They can become safe third spaces. They can become places for, your children to come after school and learn. They can be places for folks who need assistance with language barriers and things like that. So no, I think that was perfect. No rambling at all. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Well, while we come up on the end of our conversation, I wanted to kind of close us out and talk a little bit about some of the storytellers. And I say that specifically storytellers who have had an impact on your life. I know I have countless, a lot of them are erotic romance authors, which I'm very happy to share with the audience today. But I wanted to just talk to you about who some of your favorite storytellers are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of my so my mom, she's not a like an official author or anything, but my mom is a great storyteller and she tells all her stories in her Jamaican accent. And I feel like I get so connected to culture when I hear stories from my mom. So I got her this book recently where she, it's a bunch of questions about like just her life, and I'm having her write all the answers. And then my sister was like, you should record her because she's really good. And I was like, okay, so some of these questions I'm going to record you. Because she's like, sometimes I don't feel like writing and da da da. So I would start with my mom, great storyteller. But right now I'm reading this book. It's called Why Successful Societies Welcome Newcomers. And it's by this professor at Penn. I think his name is Zeke Hernandez. And he really kind of talks about how we need to move away from the victim and the villain narrative of immigration, right? How there's one group that's like, oh, these folks are victims and we got to morality, we got to support them. And there's another group that they're taking all of our jobs and they're da da da. It's like the villain narrative and how we move away from that. And I thought um I thought, the stories he telling answers a lot of the questions that we have, right? Like, do immigrants take too much from our coffers? Do they drain our economy? Do they all of the questions that folks have? Are they more, committing more crimes than Native American? Like all the questions with facts and storytelling. So that's one of my what book that I love right now. Um, my favorite book that I reread all the time. It's called The Four Agreements, and it's just so simple because you can memorize the four agreements. And yeah, I'm a big memoir person though as well. I like Educated by Tara Westover. I mean, I don't know. I love books, so I could just keep going and going and going. But maybe I'll stop there. Those are some of my mine.
No, those are great. And I'm actually trying to get more into memoirs this year. So maybe I'll hit you up for a couple of suggestions. I will read anything by Octavia Butler. That I
Yes,
think I first read
yes,
Lilith's Brood when I was in high school, and that changed my world. Like
yes.
it completely rewrote my entire worldview, my understanding of like gender, hierarchy, human history, the future of the human world. I was just like, this is a brilliant woman. Oh my God.
Hmm.
So I'll read anything by Octavia Butler.
Yeah,
Um,
me too.
See, like I don't want to fangirl because then we'll be here all day, but love her work. What else have I been really loving lately? I have been really in my romance bag. I'm going to take this moment to shout out anything by Dr. Felicia Russell, period. Go get the book. Thank y'all. Um, but I've been really in my romance bag, and I think romance is one of those genres that I'm really emphatic about this in case you couldn't tell. But romance is one of those genres that I think folks don't take seriously in terms of the like value that it can bring
Mm,
to your life.
mhm,
But I have also learned, and I think this is from Black feminists such as Audre Lorde, Bell Hooks, Patricia Hill Collins, and so many others who have written about love and about connection and about pleasure and the role that that plays in our life. So I've been really enjoying reading romance. But as a person who is also like
What's
always,
one of the romance suggestions?
oh, okay, let's talk about those. Okay, so we've got Shay Sanders. I think the word, thank you so much, Alyssa, put those in the chat. But we've got anything by Shay Sanders, Rilsey, Rebecca Weatherspoon, Kasha Thompson, Sierra Simone, and Beverly Jenkins. And I named those people because Shay Sanders, I read one of her books. I was like, this is like talking to my homegirl. I'm reading this book and I really feel like I'm talking to my homegirl about her life. But I think romance is like one of those genres I don't take seriously, but it is for me kind of really brought home the point that a lot of our political beliefs are hidden in our desires. And so I like to read romance and to see, oh, so this is what you really believe about the world, about love, about romance, and about people. So I've been really into romance lately and just kind of figuring out and seeing the world through the lens of love. So that's where I'm at right now in terms of
I'm writing all of these down
I've
because you're
already
so
copied and pasted
you're
these.
so passionate about it. I'm like, okay, maybe I need to get into romance.
Oh, okay, Tia Williams is also really great. If you are looking, her most recent one, which of course I'm blanking on the name right now, but was really, really good. I really enjoyed it. So yes, thank you so much for those options. I've already copy and pasted all of these, and I will be taking them back to my library. Thank you. Well, barring any questions from folks in the chat, which I don't think we have any right now, I wanted to say thank you again so very much. for your time today, for joining us, and for again sharing your story. I want to encourage folks who are watching to visit Dr. Russell's website, Embracing Undocumented, to also check out her book about Black undocumented students, and then in your life to do the best you can to learn about other people's stories, about other people's experiences, to share those as widely as you can, and figure out how you can tap in to continue to amplify people's voices. Anything else from you, Felicia?
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you. It was a great conversation. Hope folks learned some stuff, and feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, even just like basic questions about like, how we continue to amplify Black voices. But yeah, it was great to talk to you. And thanks for hosting this.
Yes, no, of course. And we'll be back with more stuff, I'm sure. We love working with the word and we love working with Embracing Undocumented. And so we'll be back, I'm sure. Thank you.
Yes. Oh my gosh, this conversation gave me so much life. I think anyone who was tuning in live is gonna feel the same way, and folks that watch it afterward are gonna just be like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing." So in the comments, I shared your books and links and all this fun jazz. So we have a lot of homework for people. They have a whole list of books that they need to read, and I actually like copied and pasted the list as well.
Same.
So yeah, we're gonna geek out about that for sure. Thank you so much for joining us for today's event, and to our amazing panelists. Thank you to I stand with immigrants for like sponsoring and hosting, and you're probably one of my favorite partners. I probably shouldn't say that. I'm gonna get in trouble for that. But seriously, y'all are amazing. We appreciate you and are grateful to you for spending this time with us, all the writers, booksellers, and book lovers in the room. We have many more resources for you to visit on our website, so make sure you do that. We'll be sure to include the link for this recording for you to watch it later on, and also save the date for our Margins conference. We have a virtual Margins, which is taking place September 9th to the 14th, and then an in-person conference and festival in Denver, Colorado, which is taking place September 19th to the 21st. And I also have to say, we cannot run these programs without your support. We are committed to ensuring that these programs and events remain free and accessible. So please ensure, if you're able to support us, consider making a donation to the Word at thewordfordiversity.org/donate. Thank you again for being in community with us at the Word. We hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good night.
Thank you. Bye.